All right, Nikki, very happy to see you again because we've had the pleasure to see here and This is England Festival the 3 films from you in 2021, 2022 and this year. So we'll go back to the entire work we've had the pleasure to see here later. But this year you're here with Gary Hochta, who is the producer of the film that you give us this year, which is Bishop Cox. So the title was already a bit well, when I saw that, I said Bishop Cox, there's some kind of fun with that, but no, and he's a real man, a real character, of course. And so I'd like you to tell us about that man, because of course in France I'm sure that most of the people haven't heard of Bishop Cox. So can you tell us about that guy?
Yeah, Bishop Cox is a very interesting character. He operates outside of the Catholic sort of, he's not recognized by Rome. His whole thing is that he doesn't agree with the Vatican II changes which happened in 1965. So he's a Tridentine bishop. He's a bit of a sort of a renegade, and then he was sort of ostracized further when he started ordaining women. And most famously, he ordained Sinead O'Connor in 1999. He's from the hometown that myself and Gary are from, so he was always a curious character around the town. When I was a child, I was always very interested in him. He was like a maverick, you know. And then I just I decided I wanted to make a film about him. I found a phone number for him, contacted him, and he was totally on board. And yeah, that's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
All right. So well, he's a bishop, but as you said, there is some problem with the regular Catholic Church. So make sure everybody gets the point. This is Ireland.
Yeah.
Okay. Because our festival is called This is England, but we've got Irish films too.
Yeah.
And I won't get back to this, but it's a long story. So the fact is, how can you make a living? I mean, if he's not paid by the church, what's his life like?
Yeah, I mean, he's a bit of a soul trader, you know. He works as a healer as well, but he doesn't live the life of what you would think of when you think of a bishop, you know. He lives in a small house just outside the town. He used to have a church property, but he doesn't have that anymore. And yeah, he lives quite a humble kind of life.
Yeah, very unusual character, as we can guess. So it means that you've decided to shoot a film about that man, and this is where Gary gets in, because I've always wondered what's the job of a producer on a short film, and especially all the invisible part, because when we watch the films on screen, we're very happy about it. We've got directors explaining their intentions, but all the invisible work that you did, can you tell us about that for that film?
Yeah, even the visible work was very little on this project compared to previous projects.
Yeah.
And I think so because it's a documentary. Nikki and I have worked together in the past on drama, and the producer is a lot more involved, I would say, and there is a lot more preparation for an intense period when you're shooting with talent for 3-4 days on a short project, for example. But with a documentary, it's definitely a lot more hands-off. So you're essentially making sure that, you know, the logistics of a production can happen. You're trying to take as much pressure off the director and creative talent as much as possible, so that they don't have to worry about the boring things like locations or personnel, crew, contracts, releases, and when it came to the edit, usually on a project, a producer, certainly with a drama project, might be more involved in an edit in terms of giving feedback, taking looks at various cuts and edits of a drama project. But with a documentary and something that I would say is relatively straightforward as this project, you just give the director their time, and it's a very subjective edit anyway, so the director is kind of like the creative force. So I think it's got to be hands off from the producer, and they arrive at their edit, and that's what they're happy with, and that's the final product, the finished product.
All right.
So I think a producer is, for me anyway, it's more hands off with documentary compared to drama.
Yeah, so that's a dream producer.
He's a dream director. He did the producing himself. This is, I mean, it's not exclusively, this is a line that you're going to take and I will not cross it. So Nicky, like, it's been a while since we worked together.
Yeah.
And I would say since that time, Nicky has ended up producing, especially since he's moved to Belfast, producing himself and producing for himself. I don't know whether that's because you have to, or because, you know, you feel you want to, you know, go off on a different tangent or a different project. But I don't think there's a set line where a director kind of says, oh, well, that's the producer's job. I think it happens when a project reaches a certain scale, and as a producer you might need a director or a writer or to involve a DOP or a casting agent at a particular point. But I think Nicky is, you know, I think his career is going so well now that because he produces to a certain extent as well himself, he doesn't say, I'm only wearing a director's hat and I'll only write, but I won't do any producing.
But you're right, I mean, it takes the weight of all the red tape and stuff like that you're supposed to do when you produce things like this, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so that film was very particular in a way that you shot it in one day, and then you did a lot of editing after, but before, I mean, you just didn't know what to expect, I guess, from the man. So did you have in mind some kind of final product before you started shooting, or was it a complete surprise on the day you were there? How did you
I think that? I mean, like, I went out to meet him the day before just to sort of so we wouldn't be coming in cold, and so, you know, there was a bit of trust there. I think he was very trusting anyway, because this kind of small town thing of, like, he knew who I was, who we were, you know, he knew my father, this kind of stuff. So there was a more of a level of trust there than.
So it's a very small town where you're from.
Yes, 5,000 people.
Oh, right.
In terms of my idea for how, you know, I obviously a film like this, the hook is Sinead O'Connor, but I didn't want it to be about Sinead O'Connor. You know, that's sort of the thing that gets people interested in to watch who is this guy. But his story is much more interesting than just that element of it. So I was always keen to keep that as a sort of a sidebar almost towards the end of the film, that, you know, this, I didn't want it to lead off with this Sinead O'Connor thing. And then in terms of, I knew I wanted to shoot him on an eye direct, because I really like that intensity of, particularly in obviously in documentary, when the person is just talking at the audience as opposed to some invisible character off screen. And I knew I wanted to get him playing his music, because when I was a kid, he actually used to go busking on the streets of Birr with his accordion in the full Bishop gear. And I knew I wanted him to recite one of his poems as well. So there was kind of elements there that I knew I wanted, and then just see what happens on the day. See, you know, there was probably like 2 hours of an interview that we did, and then just kind of pulling stuff out of that. And also to bear in mind that he was a very familiar character to us, but, you know, as you say, other people don't know who he is, and to try and encapsulate that story in 10 or 11 minutes, really. And one element of the producer's job that Gary doesn't mention is that he's always telling me to make it shorter, you know, cut it down, cut it down.
It's already very dense, because it's, I mean, as you said, he's a healer too, and so we've got that aspect too, which is shown in the film. And the fact that you mentioned the fact that it was rejecting what the Vatican had decided. But so it sticks to Latin.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he ordains women. So it's at the same time very, you feel maybe a little bit backward in a way, and then you feel that it's quite progressive in another way.
Yeah.
So you feel the tension in the character, and so when we've got two photographs of himself at a younger age, it's very funny to see that at one time in the film. Yeah. And so you feel that man has led a life which is quite incredible, even though he remained in a very small place in Ireland.
Yeah,
So it's quite impressive, yeah.
Yeah, and he really means it, that's the thing that really struck me, is that he's very sincere in his faith and in his work and in his, he's really, he's just very sincere character.
Yeah, and well, your film pays tribute to him, because it's really what we have in mind when we watch it. The guy is, because some people are not very religious, and so you might think this guy is a bit extreme, but no, he looks very humane, and that's what makes it very, very moving when you watch it.
Yeah, and that was a surprise to me as well, because I had never, despite the fact that I was aware of who he was and he was sort of part of my landscape as a child, I'd never actually spoken to him. And I was really surprised then when I actually met him for the first time, how affable and sort of personable and soft and gentle he was, and just very sort of warm. I really wasn't expecting that. I had thought he would be quite a strict kind of, religious character, but he was different than what I expected.
Yeah. Well, so I said that we'll speak a little bit quickly about your the films you sent us in previous years, because they were focused on people too, but very different people. And with the way you treated the subject too was very different. So is there an evolution in your work, or is it just something you pick up, a style you pick up when you've got the character in front of you? You feel, for this person, I think I'd rather work that edge. So how do you choose your subjects first, and then what about the angle when you attack your subject? Is it clearly related to the subject you're talking about, or is it your mood at the moment, or is it a purpose? Yeah. So can you tell me about that?
Well, I think because I don't come from a filmmaking background, I studied fine art and I was a painter before I ever started making films, so I never really feel kind of boxed into any particular style of making films or overly attached to any approach. So for me, it's all about characters. I'm just like a magpie. I see these interesting characters, and then I want to make something about it. So I think there's that kind of fluidity to it, because I don't have a very set idea of what kind of a filmmaker I am, because to me it's all still feels quite new,
So interesting, because it's always, I'm amazed by the fact that some people want to become filmmakers, because it's so complex. So when you're a producer at the start, it's because you're very organized, you like to do things, you like to make things in the right box and then run the stuff. But when you're an artist, it must be very difficult to start with, especially when you start as a painter. You're on your own, you choose your subject, you take the time. When you start working with a lot of people to do something, it must be quite violent process for you,
it's a learning curve, yeah, for sure. It's very different. But I think it's the same sort of insanity, though, that pervades through it all. You just have to be very single-minded and a bit like a relentless optimist that everything's going to be fine. And all the evidence suggests otherwise.
Points otherwise.
And you just have to ignore all of that and just keep going.
Yeah, true. About the fact that it's very individual when you're a painter, and it's very collective when you're a filmmaker. What about the pleasure of making it, or do you feel that there is a difference in the way you receive the final product? Or
the nice thing about making films is sometimes the aim is that the finished product is going to be bigger than the sum of its parts, and so you find the right people to work with, and then everybody brings something to it, and it elevates it to more than you could do on your own. So it's all about finding the right collaborators, which you know, I remember when I started, I used to have this notion that I'm going to shoot it myself, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to do everything myself, but actually you're better off to, there's always people better than you at stuff, you know, and the trick is to find them and to let them do their thing, and to, you know, you have your vision and what you want it to be, but you have to be kind of flexible when people suggest stuff to you that maybe it might be better this way. Often it is, you know. And for me, it's a process of, at the start I was very rigid about no, we're doing it my way, and now I'm much more open to people who are better than me at whatever it is they're doing, saying maybe we should do it this way.
Yeah. That's exactly the same when you run a festival. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us again this year. Hope to see you again in the future years, because we're always delighted to watch your films, and that was a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.